Good morning, everybody. We're right at 10 o'clock, so we'll go ahead and get started and make sure we stay on time. I don't think this one will take quite the whole hour and a half that we have planned, but we'll give ourselves a little bit of room just in case we have some other suggestions or comments toward the end. Again, I wanted to emphasize that we're all here looking for solutions, and the topic of the meeting today is what are the unique factors in Shelton that may not be prevalent elsewhere or may not have an impact elsewhere. And I have a couple of items down there, but I'm sure there are others, and I'd like to hear from each of you from your perspective what those others are. And we'll go ahead and get started. I think everybody here knows everybody from the last time. Is there anybody who wasn't here last time? I know Melanie wasn't.
I wasn't here. Melanie McCall, State Farm Insurance.
And go ahead.
Jason Drockley, Sheriff's Office.
Kevin Hansen, Jail Chief, Sheriff's Office.
And I think
Melissa Casey, Public Health. The new Lydia.
the new Lydia, okay. Good. So we'll go ahead and get started. I wanted to, when I put this together, I wanted to put this one a little bit more toward the end. But I thought we'd bring it up first since it seemed to be a topic of conversation last time, and that's the timing and the frequency of meetings. So 10 o'clock seems to work for everybody, and I wanted to make sure everybody's comfortable with that going forward. And we had planned this out initially to do this once a month so that we could do a little bit of background research, maybe think about what other people have said and come back with solutions that would benefit the kind of focus of the task force. But does every 2 weeks work better for this group?
Yes.
Okay. What is there, anybody else have any comments or concerns? I want to make sure it fits into everybody's schedule because I want to make sure everybody can attend, right? So if every 2 weeks would work better, we can certainly accelerate the schedule
Twice a month.
to meet that, yeah.
Okay, as long as they're set twice a month, because if they.
Yeah, so
Okay.
some months have the break
Okay.
in there. We have 5 weeks, so yeah, we'll do twice a month, and I'll come up. It'll be on Tuesday mornings, the same as this one, at 10 o'clock. But I'll make sure to send out the schedule to everybody in attendance. So we got that one knocked off already. So there's C. So on the discussion points, I have a few things listed here, and on the first one, we are the only incorporated city in Mason County, and with that comes some interesting things that don't necessarily happen in other counties in the state. A lot of our services are located here in Shelton, the majority of them anyway, and wanted to kind of toss that out and see what people thought about that. I know there's also issues with homelessness in Belfair, but it's not nearly as prevalent from the anecdotal stories I've heard as it is here. So are there any thoughts or comments about being the only incorporated city and why all the services are located here? Should they be located here? Are they best? Is the community that the services are trying to reach, are they best located here in Shelton, or are they best located somewhere else? What are some thoughts about that, if anybody has them?
Just from our experience, and I know that we're going to be partnering with Crossroads and doing some outreach in Belfair, but there needs to be a mobile aspect to these types of services so that because Mason County is big, you've got the Matlock area, Tahulia, Hoodsport, Belfair, Allen, places that maybe don't necessarily need an all-the-time 24-hour year-round facility, but a presence that's going out there and making contact with those communities on a regular basis, just so that there's some familiarity and that we're getting to understand what those communities need. And so Community Lifeline is working on that as well.
And I believe that there was talk about mobile services in the last meeting that we were in.
Yeah, that was just a board meeting with the Peninsula Community Health Services, the FQHC out of Farmington, and looking to bring a medical team in twice a month. And that would be through Community Lifeline. That would be the central point.
So I don't think the data for the north end of the county is remotely accurate.
Okay.
At this point, I've heard a lot of passion from the Gulf area about we need a shelter, we need this, but the data didn't match it. So for those of you that don't know, I did just dissolve North Mason Resources into Crossroads, and now took over that facility with the goal of capturing accurate data there. I feel like last year was like 7 homeless people, and I have taken over since July 1, and I can say I've seen over 50, so.
Is there a point in time count in Belfast?
There is, but,
I think they did do the outreach.
Yeah, the counts are only as accurate as your outreach is.
Yeah.
So if you don't have a strong outreach presence in the town that you want to do the number count, you're not gonna get a valid count.
there is some bad blood, I think, that worked against us on that count with the previous director that we're working to overcome. So hopefully by next year, in the next few months, we'll get a lot more accurate data on that. But there's far more than I think that we realized in that area. They're just not like in Shelton where they're right on the streets. They kind of just go to the woods a bit more.
So do we think that because, well, I guess the question is per capita, is the prevalence as big there as it is here, or it's still not
I think
quite?
it's still majority is here.
Okay. So is there any ideas about why that is?
Population.
Services.
Services.
Well, and one of the things you asked, I mean, I'm talking about just from a downtown visioning, business owner standpoint. I think we need services, I think they need to be in a vicinity where people can get to them. I don't think they should be in our downtown core.
Absolutely.
And I think with our public transit system that is completely taxpayer funded, we could put services and facilities on the outskirts and still get them access, those folks access to what they need
Okay.
through that. So, my idea, I'd love to see us build something at the C Street dump.
Yeah, Community Lifeline did some outreach and some touring of other facilities like that, where they weren't necessarily in the heart of town. They were on the outskirts of the city, and then they had their own shuttle services with a partnership with the transit center that would help coordinate transportation to, hospital or doctor's appointments and those types of things, so that it wasn't so prevalent.
And that seemed to work
Oh,
well?
it's working really well. The
Okay.
Serenity House in Colum County?
We have that in Ording also,
Yeah.
where we're both.
Is anybody familiar with what the Swinomish tribe is doing? And then Quinault's trying to copy it. Because it can't just be mitigation, it can't just be housing. They're bringing in the mental health, they're bringing in the
Absolutely.
addiction, they're bringing in everything under one roof.
Yeah, and that's a message that I would definitely support spreading, is that when we use the term homelessness, we're not just talking about people who need a roof over their head. We're talking about people who are struggling with mental health, substance abuse, trauma, those different things. And if you're not in a position to address those things, you're not going to be able to really keep up with the needs of this population.
Well, looking at this gal and Community Life and what you're doing, tell me if I'm wrong, but if someone needs help, like they've fallen through the cracks or they had a health event or something that stopped their income, there's services for them. Really, the people we're talking about, the ones that are coming from Olympia, are the mental health issues, the addictions. I mean, that is that small percentage that we need to support, because there's no just writing a check for that, right? Just getting them into a house.
No. But that's, I think, our biggest challenge is that we're seeing people who, a large portion of our population right now is elderly, and so they're dealing with a lot of severe health issues. We have a gentleman right now who has seizures almost on a daily basis and falls on a regular basis and has trouble getting to the bathroom by himself. Now, we're not a CNA assisted living in-home care facility, but unfortunately, because those services are so limited and they're very difficult to access with, just state insurance and those types of things, we end up taking those people because they are the most vulnerable, and we're doing the best we can with what we have. But it's difficult, it's very challenging when you're working with that population and you're having to provide services that you don't necessarily have the resources for.
Is that unique to Shelton though?
I don't believe it is.
No,
It's not unique to Shelton, that's
Just
statewide.
Yeah.
I had a thought about the elderly.
So the RCW from like in healthcare, Athena and I talked about this, is that you have to discharge to the person's prior state of living is the minimum you have to get. So people discharge and they can't get into a care facility because I'm gonna be honest with you, the Medicaid reimbursement rate is lower than what it costs to care for that one person. And you can only take so many losses, they end up on our streets.
And there's only so many beds that you can get
Yep.
to.
And the poor hospital can't be a rehab center for
No.
That's like another thing that Serenity House did was that they partnered with their hospital. They have a much different facility than Community Lifeline, but they partnered with their hospital to have a space for respite care so that when people are being discharged from the hospital, they have a place that they can go and receive those services until they're in better health.
Ideally, we need permanent supportive housing,
Absolutely.
a true permanent supportive housing
Absolutely.
program.
Overall, what we're talking about, right, is a continuum.
Yes,
It's emergency shelter, what's the next one? Temporary housing, affordable housing, and then traditional market rate. That's ideal, and it doesn't always happen. But
I
what
think
we're,
too that's not going to solve the issue for a lot of other people too. So you've got the people that, yes, absolutely want that help. But then you've got the ones that, one, they may not know that they need the help. May not want the help. They like being out and doing what they want to do.
Yep,
And so you've got, it's not a one size fits all.
sure. So you all heard the presentation on the Boise decision last week. So you kind of know what parameters we have to operate under in order to address the issue. So kind of the next thing on the list, if anybody didn't have anything else about what's unique about Shelton that may be contributing to this issue, we can kind of move on to the next one. Post Office Park, I know there's been a lot of discussion about that. And I know that it's been called a park for, the former mayor Dorsey said his dad used to take him down there to watch the Christmas tree lighting. And I just know yesterday, because he mentioned it, that he's almost 70 is what he said. So it's been, a community gathering spot for a long time, multiple decades. However, it is not a park, and it has never been a park. It's owned by the United States Postal Service. And it's not, it's public property because it's owned by the Postal Service, but it's not city-owned property.
But didn't we have a lease with that park for many, many years?
We did, that ended.
So it was a park when we leased it?
Well, it ended in 2018, and the lease was for the Christmas tree lighting and public use, yeah. But that ended in 2018, and the post office told us that they wanted to bulldoze it and turn it into a parking lot. And we have zero say over what they do on that piece of property because it's federal. We don't have any control over what the feds do. What we did do, however, was enter into negotiations with the Postal Service to swap what is known as Post Office Park with Brewer Park. And we thought that that would solve a couple of problems. One, Brewer Park has been an issue, as everybody knows. And kind of the modern idea of where you locate parks is not in an area that's more hidden from public view, like Brewer Park is, like the park down here is by the river. You locate them in an area with more street traffic because that tends to dissuade people from doing things that they ought not to be doing. So we entered into negotiations with the Postal Service back in 2019. To do that land swap, and we have sent them the first funds in order to get that accomplished. It's been an incredibly long process, as anybody who's ever had to deal with the federal government knows. But I was communicating this morning with the guy in Washington, D.C. that's handling the project on their end. We also talked to Green Diamond about that because I know Patty Case's maiden name was Brewer, and that was her dad. So I wanted to make sure that she was on board, and she was on board with that as well. So what the Postal Service is going to do is turn that into their parking lot. And we're gonna contribute funds to make sure that the fencing that they put up is not the chain link fence with the razor wire on top, but it'll be the wrought iron fence that the city's gonna pay for, because we wanna preserve that, the character, the historic character, nature of the downtown. But once it does turn into, once Post Office Park does turn into a city-owned park, we'll have more options to be able to enforce certain things that we don't now. We've taken some other steps, like putting the camera up on your building, and thank you for the use of the power, we appreciate that. So we're able to monitor it more closely than we have been in the past, but it's still, if someone is there in the daytime, we can't just tell them they have to leave. Because it could be, you know, there's a group that gets together called the Summer Lunch Club, and we go around to various parks. And we have lunch in various areas, and it would be no different if the police were to come and tell us to leave than if they were to tell somebody that appears homeless to leave. There's constitutional provisions there that we simply can't get around. But I wanted to point that out as something unique in Shelton, because it is. I haven't seen any other circumstance, and neither has anybody at the post office, which is why it's taken, part of the reason why it's taken this long to resolve.
So where's your end game? Where's the timeline? What are we at? We're talking 2 years, 5 years?
So the post office is doing their engineering right now for the parking lot in Brewer. We've sent them the initial payment to get that completed, to get the swap completed. Hopefully, I would say, when I started this process, I said I hoped it would be done in under a year. It's been about 3, partially due to COVID, partially due to the federal government and not talking to each other. But I did talk to them this morning, and it's still moving right along. Post office has already done the public notice of the land swap. They did that 18 months ago. So the public process portion of that is complete. So we are working on it, but it is incredibly slow, working with the feds. So any thoughts on that?
Well, I thought it was dead when they asked for money, so I'm glad it's moving forward. I hadn't
Yeah.
heard it was progressing.
They asked for a pretty significant chunk of money, but we thought it was important enough, one, because that's where the Christmas tree lighting takes place and has for 70 years, to preserve that. And 2, because Brewer Park has been an issue for such a long time that we wanted to try to solve that. And it's 2 birds with 1 stone. But it's unfortunately a really long throw. So that's a unique piece of Shelton. I think the other one, if nobody has any thoughts on that or wants to make any comments about kind of the direction we're moving on that, kind of move on to the next item. This is why I said this would take an hour and a half, because we're going through this stuff really quickly. The next one is public property. Now Shelton owns more property, the city owns more property that's not in the private sector than any city or government that I've ever worked for. We own a ton. And one of the things that I'm trying to do is get some of those properties that we won't need 20, 30, 40, 50 years from now for something into the private sector so that something productive can be done with it. We're working with several different entities to get that property sold or potential land swaps. But with the Boise, or with the Boise decision and with the ordinances that we passed here, if we don't have the capability to provide shelter for homeless individuals, then we cannot require they leave. We can't criminalize it, right? So that has a huge impact on what we're able to do as far as a law enforcement or a code enforcement response when we encounter these issues with camps and everything else.
On that note, Jeff, and even with the city attorney and researching, the Ninth Circuit decision, the city has the ability to set up an autonomous zone. And it's even, that information was given to us by the gal at the Public Health Department. And this is something that I'm pushing.
We certainly do have that ability, yeah.
So, well, to me and a lot of people that I run with and have conversations with that are business owners in the downtown area, it's not happening. So
No,
why can't we make that happen?
we can, and it would be very similar to the private camping ordinance the council is considering now, and the camping on public property ordinance that the council already considered and adopted. And I'll tell you why, here on this next bullet point, D down there. We don't have enough beds. I think everybody recognizes that. We don't have enough shelter beds. So we can set up an autonomous zone, but we don't have enough shelter beds to accommodate the folks that are here.
So why do we have to have a sheltered bed to let them know that they can't stay in the downtown? They can go to an area that's not the downtown. We're not telling them that they can't go to another area,
Sure.
but they just can't be downtown.
What happens if they refuse not to leave?
Well, then that's when you take a whole different, direction with it. I mean, if they're refusing to leave, that's no different than trespassing or evicting or anything else. I mean, if they're hanging in Holly's alcove or on the sidewalk or, doing whatever they're doing, then, because our attorney said, we can move them. We have the law's on our side by doing that. So they cannot be in this zone. They can go to another zone, they can go outside of that, but they can't be downtown. It negatively impacts the businesses.
Sure.
And the businesses is where the city gets the B&O taxes to run. So I'm just curious, and David Ross said this when he was running for the mayor of Olympia. Why do their rights trump our rights? And our rights shouldn't trump theirs.
Right.
But there's no reason that we can't have a clean downtown business area.
So I have a question too, on that note right there. So you were talking about this breakfast club, lunch club that meets.
Yeah.
The difference is the lunch club isn't leaving copious amounts of trash everywhere. And the other burden, because I don't think anybody cares that they're homeless or sitting on a park bench or doing anything. It's the other stuff that comes along with it. It's the 15 shopping carts, the wagons, the cot, it's those things that make it a problem.
Sure.
The
Understood.
homelessness isn't the problem. There's 8 entities in here that deal with that. It's the other stuff.
Yep.
So a while ago, the city had floated the idea of a mitigation site. And that, I think, was mostly, the opposition to that was mostly the location, because it was still the entry.
It's always going to be the location.
Well, but it would, yes, but
But what if we properly managed it? What if you had case managers in there? What if you brought the services there? What if you needed a carrot, but you also need some bite too.
you
So
gotta have a place that,
you gotta have a place.
and it's working in Aberdeen, right?
It is working now, Aberdeen. I was just gonna bring that
Yeah,
up. They brought
Aberdeen's
a
actually
mitigation
really good.
site and it is fruitfully working in Aberdeen right now.
I mean, so I guess I'm gonna ask this group, because the city, proposed it and it got shot down. To me, understanding Boise and everything, if we're gonna say move along, because if they're shooting up heroin, we can't take them to jail, there's no beds, right? But we can't say you have to leave, but we have to have a place for them to go. And we don't have the beds, so that means a mitigation site. Are we against it as a community? To have a place that's contained and a place to say, if you're gonna play by the rules, we got all these places for you to go. If you're not, go over here.
And I don't think that we're against it per se, and I'll be the first one to admit that I was adamantly against it. You can look at city council meetings and see the passion that me and my wife have, and we're gonna be that way. After listening with a couple of individuals here, I have learned and gained other knowledge, imagine that, that I could probably get behind something like that. If, like you said, it was managed appropriately, lifting somebody out of a quagmire of homelessness and lack of knowledge and teaching them life skills that maybe they never learned before because maybe their parents were in that same situation. Once you learn, your knowledge base, your sense of self, your well-being, everything will lift it'll lift a good percentage of people back out of where they need to be, right? And that's what you hope for. And then there's other people that are just going to make a flat-out decision that they don't want to, like Sharon said, they just want to live like that. Those are the people that need to find another place to be. Because as a community, we need to come together to get this out.
In order to get them away, we have to make it uncomfortable. So we either take services or we have to make it uncomfortable,
So-
and a place to take them.
So I could get behind an area, as long as we had it all wrapped around with the other services, so that they had a place. But what I don't wanna see is, I don't wanna see what we have happening now, where it just is an open-ended thing, and there's no services, and there's no end game, and there's no nothing for it. I don't wanna get behind that in any way, shape, or form.
Colin, would you?
I was just gonna say that there is definitely a lack of shelter beds here, you all know that. There's also a lack of housing. But I wanna remind everyone again, I know this is really challenging because people don't normally understand what is going on with people that are chronically homeless. But when you're a child and your brain develops around trauma, you only know fight or flight. Your brain develops into an adult body with that fight or flight mentality. So saying they're not really wanting services and it's not that they don't want it, it's that their brain is not wired in a way that they can accept them. That is where skilled mental health professionals come in. There is a crisis with the mental health support right now. There are not enough people who can support even basic mental health needs. So there's plenty of answers and solutions out there, but it is going to require the want of this town to put in the shelter beds and to have the permanent supportive housing and the transitional housing and all those services. I'm telling you, I know it's hard, and I agree with you as a business owner. I don't want that downtown either. I don't think any of us want to see that downtown. We all want to see a clean town, but there is also a crisis that is going on that is going to continue to go on. And the police do not have the resources or the means to deal with that kind of mental health. Neither do the homeless providers. And the people who are working in the hospitals are so overwhelmed with the needs right now, there's just no outlet. So what are the solutions that we can look to? I think partnering with the tribes is an exceptional way to go because they have the land, they have a lot of funding that can help with mental health and medical support. I also think that the hospitals in town have a means to help us do the kind of outreach we're looking for medically with a mobile support van. And that FQHCs, which are the federally qualified health centers, also have funding. So I think we have solutions we can work together on, but we just have to find a way to get those funds in here to help us. But services are the way to actually reduce it, and I know that seems counterproductive because most people are like, no, I think if you give services, more will come. People do not want to be homeless. I have never heard a homeless person say they are enjoying that lifestyle. And if they are saying that, they're also at the same time under the influence of a substance that they're using to numb that pain that has existed since they were children. So it's really hard, I get it. It's very frustrating. It's harder for those of us who are in this service field trying to do the work when we have a community that's angry with us because they don't think we're doing enough. But there's only, I would say, probably 15 of us in this town who are working for a solution, and the number of people that we're dealing with far exceeds our ability to be effective. So
I want to be clear, none of the business community doesn't think you guys aren't doing enough. I mean, if you've heard any of that, we have amazing services. The challenge for us as business owners, is the mental health needs to come. That's why that Swinomish model is great. But at the same time, while we're building to that, we can't. As business owners, we have to be able to have a downtown.
Absolutely.
So we have to find this, but I don't want you guys to think for a second that none of us think you're doing your jobs at all.
If I may, I mean, working with Community Lifeline, I am relatively new to my position. However, when I became involved and when I grew my team, and we are doing outreach, the majority of them, when we're conversating and we're interacting and we're asking them, what their needs are and how we can help, majority of them want to engage. But the truth of the matter is we have 14 beds. 14 for a homeless population of hundreds. We don't have the funding. We have the ability. I mean, Tammy is an SUDPT. She's working on her hours for substance use. We have people interested in participating in mental health services. We have people who want to do that daily outreach. We have people who want to be involved, but we don't have the funding to support that. And I've screamed that since the day I became associated with Community Lifeline. We have people who genuinely care and have the knowledge and skills to provide the services that are needed. But I will agree with you, the downtown area is not where we need to be located, and I've said that too since I started. Our homeless population has unfortunately, when Community Lifeline started, it was this faith-based program that maybe housed, 8 or 10 people, provided meals, it was no big deal, it was quiet. Our homeless population has unfortunately grown to a level that we cannot contain it in our current location. There's no way to effectively have a good downtown and have the shelter be where it is.
But I would argue on that point that where else would you go? I mean, we have acquired a lot of money to purchase a building, to build a shelter, to create beds, and we can't find a place. Because so the only option we currently have is downtown. So I would challenge, where would you want us to go?
No, absolutely.
Where would you have me go build a building that meets the standards and can provide what I can get in the building I'm currently in? Because if you can show me where that is, I'll happily go investigate it. But I'm gonna tell you, when we started our off-site shelter houses, we have mental health people that have gone in there and we go, let's just give you a bed. And within 3 months, they've gone into treatment, they have got their mental health they're on new drugs. We've had an exceptional experience and good outcomes of us putting them into homes. So I hear what you're saying, and I'm all for it if that's what you want, but then show me where to go, because our hands are tied on what we can afford.
What's the blocking that's allowing it? Is it code? Is it?
It's money,
zoning?
and there's no openings. Where can I put it? The building we currently have has the ability for us to put 12 spaces in, pretty affordably, okay? Plus continue having our outreach center. So we have 12,000 square feet. I can't go build 12,000 square feet for what we have. I can't do that.
Right, and they were given, so through the legislature, they went to our representatives and got some money granted to them.
Right.
But I think it's what you're having issues is being able to build or expand those spaces, right?
Right, because the amount of space that's currently available is so open that we can create what we need without, we have to bring it up to code, we have to remodel basically the whole darn building. It's a huge project.
And this is for youth, to be clear.
Right.
Correct.
So
Under
which
25
is
and up.
a percentage, but
Correct.
So I think that is the difference when we're talking about youth centers. Youth centers be downtown. There's schools around here. Having downtown is a little bit different than having people at Brewer Park and not having the beds that we have to have at Community Lifeline. Tammy's probably tired of seeing me on shift because 3, 4, 5 hours a day we're working at Brewer Park, and it's tying up my officers to deal with them. That's other services to the city that we're not providing. And yes, all law enforcement has an incredible amount of mental health training. And with the community, we are working. And as far as 2nd Street, we're always kicking people out of your stoop. You've probably seen us on camera all the time. That's the difference, because that's a private stoop. That is a private property that we can move somebody along or trespass them or arrest them for trespassing. When it comes to Brewer Park, and we know, because we've got Tammy, Jamie, Athena on speed dial, we say, hey, do you have a bed available? Nope. All right, well, you gotta move. And they tell us, basically, kick rocks. I can't make it a criminal case to move them, because there is no other further place for them to go. And that frustrates law enforcement just the same as the business owners, because we feel like we can't provide the services that we want to. We can't provide the services to assist Community Lifeline, navigators, and we get just as frustrated. So we definitely hear you, Dean. We do. 2nd Street, we definitely hear you. We want to do more, but we're...
So if we had this mitigation site, a place where they could go camp, could they go there
Absolutely.
that night, like
We
you're
would
kicking someone out?
Honestly, we would drive them. We've done that. We've had people
So,
that have ridden MTA out here.
if they're willing to camp there, they could go camp there.
So,
Out of
yeah,
the-
so right now, council, there's been a code on the books since 2015 that you could have mitigation sites, basically. Council is considering amendments to that code right now that would allow up to 30 individuals, and there's criteria that goes along with it. They have to be in contact with the police department, that type of thing, for warrant checks. But they also have to have access to clean water, to kitchen facilities, to restroom facilities, because that's a big thing that we're trying to mitigate is the sanitation piece. The problem is, again, you know, we had proposed this a year and a half ago, 2 years, and people came out on social media and council meetings and everything else and just slammed the idea. So that's where we get kind of stuck. The second problem is, where do we put it? I follow these types of issues all around the state, all around the region, and no matter where you put it, no matter where, the people in that neighborhood scream bloody murder, right? So there has to be a place to put it. I heard a suggestion that we have the C Street landfill that we're cleaning up. That's just about to get started. Ecology finally gave us approval to go ahead and get that done, so we're about to put that out to bid. It's a 13-acre site. There are 4 acres that have to be capped with soil, fenced off, and monitored for the long term. That leaves 9 acres. The problem is, if you put a site on that, if you put a mitigation site on that piece of property, the only headline you will ever see is, we shove homeless people down on their luck to a toxic waste dump. That's what you're gonna see. So, no matter what we do, people are going to be upset about it. But it's not like we haven't been trying.
So what are you trying to build in these mitigation sites? When you say kitchen, they don't have a kitchen down in front of my business.
No, they don't, but.
What constitutes a kitchen?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so something very similar to what Quixote Communities is doing with a central room that has the kitchen, the bathroom facilities, the showers, but then the homes kind of around the central facility. There's a type of.
What do you mean by homes?
Individual
I'm
units.
getting there. So around the facility, there's a type pre-manufactured something called a pallet shelter, and it sleeps 4 to 8, I think. There's a couple different sizes, but those would act as a shelter that people could stay. You know, they have the access to the clean water, the restroom facilities, those types of things. Where do you put it?
I thought it'd be a place where they could pitch their tent, the same tent they're pitching in the park.
And we can absolutely do that. We can do that as well, but they still have to have access to the restroom.
It doesn't matter where you put it, people are gonna be upset, but I think people in this room need a united front and the positivity of case managing, doing things and spreading the word properly.
Keeping the community clean too.
I love that location because we could build around it. I mean, we could, over time and with federal or state dollars, start with the mitigation and then maybe be able to bring in some health services, some mental health services, some other things, because with 9 acres, that gives us the ability to do a lot of things. But the first issue is, where are we gonna do it?
Yeah.
And to me, the mitigation side is just the first step. It's not, oh, let's just all dump them in this corner.
Yep.
That's not what we're doing, but I think we can build services around that. It's gonna be years and years to get the money and do it, but we've gotta start somewhere.
But it could show the data and show the need in our community, which
And
could
there's-
get you the funding
And there's a
for
lot
the
of money out there
alternative
for
programs.
homeless.
Yeah.
And I think a
What
lot
I've
of
talked
it is
to-
the messaging. So if the first thing out of your mouth is, yeah, we're gonna cap that toxic site,
Right.
then that's what they're gonna target. But if you start talking about a place where you're gonna provide mental health and homes and bathrooms so that they can shower and get a job, things like that, you're changing the message to a positive instead of a negative. So I think and I bet you've got a room full of people that would love to help with that message.
I would focus on the 9 acres, not the 4 acres.
Right.
No, I get what you're
I
saying
get it.
though.
But part of my job is to see what's gonna go wrong.
Yeah.
And you're 100% right, so.
So, and I agree with all of that, and we could do it. I've talked before with several of the providers in the room about what I eventually wanna see, which is the very thing that you were talking about earlier, right? emergency shelter on the ground floor, offices for caseworkers, an office for a dentist to come in once a month, a doctor to come in twice a month, a barber to come in, once a week. More, a little bit transitory transition housing up above. That's a $20 million build. Yeah.
That's conservative.
Right. So, but that, and we can absolutely do that. Now, I guess the next question is, and did you have?
I was gonna say, even with pallet shelters, we need somebody to run it.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, it's,
Coyote build it.
you don't just fence it, yeah.
And somebody has to be there, even if we put 30 pallet shelters there tomorrow,
Right.
we need somebody there,
Yep.
not leave it unmanned.
No,
Yeah.
absolutely.
You know,
Okay, with all this being said, and I just harken right back to downtown with what we have and setting it up to where it's a clean downtown. If you create these, and we have 3 people that come into town and set up a tent somewhere, are you gonna tell me that the police now absolutely have the ability to take those people and give them the resources so that they can move themselves? But if they don't, then they can get in the back of Jay's car and he can take them there.
That's a great transition to kind of what I wanted to talk about next.
One more thing on piggybacking on that is a lot of what I've heard from the cops that come to my business is the homeless shelter that's by our business won't accept those people. They're banned.
Yep.
Are they gonna be banned from the mitigation side?
Yes. If they have,
If
well,
there's reason to, I mean, if the
Well,
only
I mean, the
reason.
majority of the people that are in that park across from me, there's a reason why people don't want them.
Well, and then I just want to clarify on the banning portion. So prior to Athena's leadership, a lot of people were banned from Community Lifeline for their lifetime. We've changed that. So the only reason somebody would be banned from our center is if they were violent or harm to themselves or others.
And that's not permanent.
It's
So
not
we,
permanent.
and we make that outreach with those folks on a regular basis to say, hey, how are things going? What are you doing today? How are you feeling? Those types of things. Trying to encourage them back into shelter and trying to get them to understand good behavior versus bad behavior. And sometimes if somebody has never learned those skills, as Nina said, some of these people as children were just raised in these environments where they literally don't have the skills that you and I have. And so it takes that, effort and engagement over.
Well, that's what I was just wondering though, if we go to all this and then we still have those 5% of people that are banned.
So I
According
think
to
most
this
of our funding, Department of Commerce leads most of this funding, you have to be a low barrier. So the only way you can be banned, it's temporarily, is if you're going to harm someone or harm yourself. I've banned 2 people in 3 years.
So then what's the recourse for the police when a business owner calls and says, these people need to go, they're camped up alongside my business and they say, the shelters won't take them?
I will say most of the time I call and confirm that and it's false.
Yeah.
The client's giving false information to the police,
And-
most of the time.
And this takes care of the majority of the issue. If there are those 1 or 2 people that truly are banned, if they're trespassing, they're trespassing. I mean, that's a lot easier of a problem to manage than what we have right now.
Well, that's trespassing on private property, like
Right.
in my parking lot or,
Right.
Holly's.
Right.
But if they're in the middle of Tully,
no. So the ordinance that council passed a couple months ago where no camping on public property, that's when that would kick in.
But I think the
then why
question,
isn't it kicked in now?
Right.
Because we have to have a place for them
the
to
question
go.
is where do you go when they won't go to any shelter,
Right.
or they can't go to any shelter?
Where do you?
You
The
go to
police have
jail.
no
We
way-
don't have any jail beds, and I'm sure Officer,
And-
or Chief Hansen will tell us why we don't have any beds, because,
And you can't even go to jail because it can't be illegal to be homeless.
no, I'm saying if they break in the law.
Well, no,
you know.
the way I kind of put this is, I can ask the community with messaging and everything else to spend $20 million to build a great facility that will serve this place for 20 years. What do we do when we go to someone that's camping illegally and say, here's this shelter space, let's take you there, and they say no? What do we do?
They go away,
To where?
further out of town,
How do we,
further out of the autonomous zone.
how do we force them to do that?
Well, at that point in time, they're in violation.
Right.
Because there is a space that they can go. It doesn't have to be a shelter or whatever else. It could be the alley on, uptown in a residential area. It doesn't have to be the alley between my building and Cutrate.
No, but how do we force them to leave?
Well, because they're breaking the law.
You're right, so if they're breaking the law, what do? We
Make it
cite-
uncomfortable.
We
Yeah.
cite them, we arrest them.
Yeah?
You drive them out of town?
To the mitigation
There's,
side.
you just heard, there's no jail, no beds at the jail.
Well, you bring them out of the business zone and you say, okay, camp there.
And they come back in 5 minutes.
You do it again.
You gotta make it uncomfortable.
There was an article in Seattle about an area that they were doing, they're having the same problem that we have. Okay, and they were gonna be doing the tiny homes. And the gentleman that they were interviewing and having the conversation with, he said, you need to make it as uncomfortable for me as is humanly possible, so that when I set up my little zone, my little camping zone, and I get all this stuff set up, and somebody comes and tells me I have to move it again, and I have to move it. Then they come again, I have to move it again. Pretty soon, they're gonna get the hint, and they're gonna go to where they're left alone, which is going to be out of the downtown core area, or you've made it hard enough for them that they then decide to seek out some of the services that you all provide that they really need in the first place.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter where they go,
So-
no one is going to want them, and they will always call the police, and they will always call the sheriffs. It does not matter where you place people.
Right.
I'm telling you, they will verify what I'm saying to you. Nobody wants to see people who are homeless near them because of the stereotypes and everything that goes with them. And I'm telling you, if you want to stop seeing them, you've got to start funding beds and you've got to start funding shelters, period. That's all that's going to stop
And
this.
if I may, just as a person with like firsthand experience, and Tanner can back me up on this too, if Lawson approaches somebody in his uniform, and he's a nice guy, but in his uniform, and for somebody who's not comfortable with that, of course they're just gonna be like, oh, no, thank you. When Tammy and I approach somebody and we're not in uniform and we're building that relationship, they're a lot more apt to say, you know what, I'll give this a try. Because usually when they're saying no, it's out of fear. It's out of being already uncomfortable, to be honest. And so when I go to talk to somebody and I say, look, I'm not just this big scary person who's gonna, wave a bunch of rules at you. I just really am worried about your safety, and I'm really worried about the way that you're living like this, and I wanna help you. So come give it a shot. If it doesn't work, I'm not gonna hold you there, you're not in jail. But if it works, it works. And 9 times out of 10, I get people off the street into the shelter that way.
And I have to point out too that I understand that your concern is downtown, because that's where your business is. The task force is about the entire city. So, I have to focus on that, and the council has to focus on the needs of the entire city, not just one neighborhood of it. Not that there's anything wrong with what you had to say, but I just wanted to make that point. We gotta focus on the entire community. But you make it uncomfortable, cite them, that type of thing. There's a thing, there's actually been a court decision, I can't remember if it's federal or state, but malicious prosecution, it's a malicious prosecution, I believe it's a whack. That if officers are continually approaching the same individual for the same thing, that's frowned upon. I get what you're saying.
I'll be honest too, when we're talking about some of these people and they're stuck in that childlike mentality, they become, I'm not saying that everybody needs to be treated like a child, but I'm just saying, if you talk to them and say, hey, let's just try to work this out, you know what I mean? Then they're a lot more likely to have a conversation with you than me just constantly reprimanding them, then they're gonna get like defiant and defensive and purposely almost opposite of you. We have to try to talk to them like human beings if we want to see them do what we want them to do. I'll be honest, they're used to being uncomfortable. You'd have to really go out of your way, which is a big waste of your time and resources and energy, to make them more uncomfortable than they already are. So coming from a different approach might just be an easier thing to do.
Well, I think too, you've heard, the lack of beds available in jails is part of the issue, right? Because you can have the carrot. You can have.
Even if you had a 400-bed jail right now, the problem you're gonna have is staffing the jail.
Right.
Right.
It's absolutely impossible to staff what we've got.
Yep.
Sorry to speak for you, but it must be tough.
No, I
If
think,
you can find us people to man the jail, to
yeah. Well, and
Well,
the whole problem isn't the jail, right? It's not. I don't think that's the entire problem. I think it's a component of it. But in order to
Yes.
solve any problem, you have to have the carrot and you have to have the stick. That's why I'm saying, what do we do when they tell us no?
I need to make it clear to this group that, I've heard 3 or 4 times now from different people in this room that the jail will not take people. That's not true. The jail has 7 beds that the city pays for every day, whether or not there's an inmate in them or not. And if the inmate can pass medical clearance and site clearance, then we'll take them if you have a bed, as long as those 7 beds are full. So, I think there's a big misconception or misnomer amongst this community that we just don't take the city's prisoners. That's not true.
Can you explain the golden ticket to me?
The golden ticket? Yeah, so the admittance rules say that if you are such a state that you can't comprehend, for instance, if you're so drunk that you can't stand up, then don't bring him to jail. Take him to the hospital, get him cleared.
So my understanding was the golden ticket had something to do with misdemeanors versus district court warrant. Is that not accurate?
Never heard the term.
No. So, the contract that the county has with the city to house their prisoners specifically defines what a city prisoner is. And the city prisoner is defined by contract as being held solely on a city charge. So, if Lawson arrests somebody on a municipal obstructing charge, criminal charge, and the person has a warrant at a district court, they are no longer considered a city prisoner by the contract.
Right.
So, the county, about 4 years ago, amended the contract to allow those people to be booked into the facility under the city contract, under what we call special beds or 80 beds, and there's 2 of those.
Right.
So there is a provision for us to take those people.
So the provision to take them, sure, but they won't be released until the district court case has been adjudicated, right?
If they're in one of the any beds, yes, the city loses control over how long that person's gonna be in jail.
Right. But we still pay for it.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's my contract.
Yeah.
So, the other challenging thing that we find in the jail is, these homeless people, and I can right now go down a list of names of people that live downtown here, or in the city limits, of people that come to that jail day in and day out, and they get released, they come back, they get released, they come back, and most of them probably shouldn't even be in jail because they got significant mental illness. And then we take them, Lawson's people take them out to the hospital to get site clearance. They're there for 15 minutes, the emergency room doctor comes out and says, are you okay? Can you breathe? Can you, let me check your heart. Okay, you're good to go to jail. And then the person comes down to jail, wipes poop on the walls. So, it's a no-win situation for anybody. That person doesn't belong in jail. They don't belong in the city. They sure as heck don't belong sleeping in a tent down here in downtown by the post office. What do you do with them? This hospital will not take them. The hospital is not interested whatsoever in dealing with people with significant psychosis. They don't have the facilities.
We don't have the
They don't have
inpatient
the people.
facilities.
They
We
don't
have
have anything.
outpatient. I have 9 outpatient providers that are
Exactly.
full of people out in town. The problem with once they're in the hospital is the state has a very strict
Yep.
rule about what is detainable. So if that person tells you they're okay, I have watched somebody hit somebody with a car,
Yep.
come back in and say, no, I'm not gonna do that again, and then not get detained and let go. Like, we can't hold them in the hospital if they're not meeting the criteria for the state. The state of Washington is one of the most difficult states to detain somebody for mental health in all of the country. We are one of the worst.
So if the hospital won't keep or can't keep them under the rule, if the jail is not the appropriate place for them, or they don't have room, because at this point, it's mostly down to staffing, right? What do you?
I think that we need to have a facility that is not just for homeless shelter, but it's prepared to respond to mental health crises. It's prepared to deal with substance use disorder. It's equipped to have services for case management and life skills and all of the things that maybe people just didn't learn when they were younger. And we have an amazing community of people that do that work every day. Our problem is funding. We don't have the funding to.
Isn't that what the facility that they just spent a whole butt-ass ton of money for, where the PUD building is? Isn't that what that's for?
It's supposed to be what
And it's
it's for, except for it's not just for Mason County residents, and it's involuntary.
It's
So if somebody
involuntary.
voluntarily wants to go seek treatment, they're not gonna get in there. It's very hard for somebody to voluntarily go seek treatment.
And
And it's just as difficult for somebody to be involuntary, because crisis has its perks, but when we request for a DCR to come out, because we know that is the only person that is going to involuntarily detain somebody, it's very slim.
Yeah, when they're signing their name thinking, oh my God, am I gonna lose my job?
Yeah.
Which I'm gonna say I've seen happen twice.
Oh, yeah.
They absolutely needed to be detained.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely needed to, but each time they're like, oh my God, I hope I don't lose my job over this.
Yeah.
You know, so I totally understand, and it is, they're taking a chance every time they sign that piece of paper.
So, but my question is like being as that Washington State is one of the most challenging and treatment centers and mental health facilities are difficult to get into. If you had a shelter that was equipped with the right people, and it's not a treatment center, it's not a mental health treatment center. People can voluntarily say, hey, I'm ready to get some treatment and not be put on this ridiculously long waiting list or told, well, sorry, there's no services for you. You know, we're able to respond then in the moment, but it just takes the right people in a room to put that together.
One thing that I have seen myself is myself and a friend gave somebody a place to a roof over his head. Small room, but a roof over his head. And the first night he was told not to have company, and supposedly he said he would have had a sponsor who would get him off drugs, but he had like 20 people over there, so that didn't work. I had to go take the key away from him. I said, why did you do this? You have a place. He said, but technically it was warmer in my tent and all my friends are there. What people don't understand is these people have a community. Just like you, me, if we have our own friends, we have a place we live. If somebody said, hey, I don't want you living there, you gotta get out. You, whoa, wait, you, and that's the problem. We have to treat them, yeah, positively, but as people. Even though they have problems, even though they're on drugs, they have to know that, okay, you have a community of people, maybe your people would like to join this situation or this group, and maybe we can get all of you together someplace where you'll be safer. Instead of trying to look at one person, find out.
Peddler's license is what.
Yes, okay.
And they don't show up for court, which they likely won't, then what do?
Don't you think that would, though, deter them from, if they knew they had to have a license in our town, don't you think
So
that once
your
the word
plate
gets
is
out,
filmed,
that might
get in it?
stop
Yeah.
a lot of them from being on the corners, and then maybe they'll go to other towns?
I've seen that happen where you do what Claire mentioned, is you find the people that are giving money. So, yeah.
Well, I think it would be really important that we have funders here in this meeting, because you don't have a lot of funders at this meeting. And we need funders to be here to hear what we're saying so we can get them.
Yeah.
I think it's really important to have tribes here. We don't have any tribes here, and they have land and they have funding. Just so you know, too, for our Quixote communities, the one we're building in Shelton, the 30 beds, it's $4.7 million to build 30 beds, and also the community room that has a commercial kitchen, offices, bathrooms, and 2 different, so it's not like so exorbitant that you can't do it. The funding was there, we got it, we're going. I do understand that we are a recovery-based housing program, which is not the lowest, but still low barrier. It's a start, it's for veterans, so I think that once you see the success that Quixote will have and has had from other sources, you'll see that it's a way to go. And that started with encampments, by the way, in Olympia. It was an actual homeless encampment that churches then started rotating on their sites, and it turned into the 30-unit village, and now we have 3. So it is possible to turn what is a horrific situation where people like you, and I have to keep saying this again, it's so frustrating for us too as it is you as a business owner. Nobody wants anyone defecating in their front step.
No.
There's not one person in this room who's like, yeah, that's cool. I think that's awesome they're defecating there. It's frustrating, it's sad, but there are solutions, and I think that's what you guys want. The business community doesn't want to hear more talk about, oh, those poor people. You want to hear solutions, and I'm like, great, then let's get funders in the room. Let's tell them what our crisis is that we have going on here. They know it exists, but you're the town. You are the town in Mason.
Yep.
So you are the one that will get the funding for it, and as long as they hear the providers that are here and the need based by other people who are not providers because people think we're skewed and want it just for our own.
So when you talk about
edification.
funding, so are you talking about grants and?
Yes.
So let me, there's a couple of things I wanted to mention. First, the idea to mitigate the homeless issue at Brewer Park, and when the problem came up with Post Office Park, that idea came from Mayor Inesco. So that's where it started, to solve that problem, because we all noticed it then. Secondly, one of the highest priority items on the policy agenda, the legislative agenda for the legislature when they start next year, is help for mental health services, state help for mental health services. Because we recognize that that is a major part of the issue with homelessness in this community. And then third is looking for resources to build a shelter. That's part of the legislative agenda for the city as well.
Well, and I think too, you say that there's no funders in the room. There are. You've got the city and you've got the county. You've got our health department over here that gets money to do certain things. I mean, it's designated for certain projects or
Yeah, it's got
issues.
brackets around it, yeah.
And so, but Dave and I met with, who was she? It was Tri-Cities mental health, or health center. So it's not just, they have mental health there, they have health clinics, they have services for the people that need it most. So those are things that we can do. I know we're talking about things that, you know, how do we solve this, how do we solve this? Well, there are ways to solve this, but we need to be able to talk about those ways, get those things out there on the table so that we can all start planning. Everybody's working in their little silos. We can't do that anymore. We've got to work together.
I know our state representatives and potential state senator is focused on this issue and are looking at projects to address it in this community as well. So everybody knows about it. Everybody knows what the problem is. Everybody has good ideas about how to address it. It's how do we address the problems we have right now.
I'd say fill up your 7 beds. If somebody, if you're paying for 7 beds and they're available to you, use them.
Yeah.
If you have,
You're Sergeant, they're not full.
no.
Sergeant
So
Lawson.
Very rarely
the
full.
last 6 months, they haven't been used at all?
Well, no, I'm not gonna say it all.
Right.
I mean, but limited,
That's kind of shocking.
yeah.
Yeah.
Sergeant Lawson, go ahead.
I do know there's days where we'll have 1 bed available.
Yeah.
And having that 1 bed available and locking somebody up on trespass, we might not be able to lock up somebody else. Then we're stuck. We're tying our own hands where if we have somebody, because we could be dealing with 3, 4, 5 different people a shift. And if we try and get creative, what Chief Hansen said, we try to take people in for mental health eval. There is people up and down the line where there's a shortage of staff and people are getting frustrated. And I'll be honest, I've been called by St. Pete staff and yelled at for bringing in people that need mental health evaluation or a hold. We could have taken this person for a crime and when we get on scene and we see somebody in crisis and they're committing a crime, there's a couple things that we gotta look at. Do they even know what they're doing, for starters? Are they so out of it? Are they hearing voices? Are they seeing things that aren't there that we have to take into account for? Because if I arrest somebody and they get on their medication, they're like, I don't know what you're talking about, because we've seen that. We've seen people get on the right medication and they're a complete 180 from what they were when we contacted them in the field. So when we take them in there and say, hey, we contacted this person for malicious mischief or trespassing, but they're hearing voices or they're talking to people that aren't there, we're getting accused of not doing their job by taking them somewhere to get them the mental health help that they need. While they're in crisis, I can't take them and expect the jailers to watch them and be responsible for somebody that probably shouldn't be in jail at that point in time anyways. So, as Chief said, we try to get creative. The city can't afford a whole new jail, and they can't get the staff, which sucks on both ends. Honestly, there is a lot of times.
I just have a question for Chief about, so the 2017 booking restrictions don't apply to our 7 beds?
As long as the,
I have them right here, they're pretty stringent.
yeah, that's county stuff,
Yeah.
you still get your beds.
Okay, because it's on here, City of Shelton.
Yeah.
And then also,
But it also says it does not apply to City of Shelton prisoners if you look at the end of it.
So I just wanted,
Actually, you got the old one.
I just want to
This
clear
is
up,
from 2017, also, okay.
just because it's been clear, or just because kind of the takeaway was, we don't use all of our beds, I just want to be clear, my understanding of what the golden ticket is, okay? So my understanding is, if you have, let's see, the people that generate a lot of calls and are responsible for misdemeanor charges in the city, like homelessness, or would-be homelessness, we had shelter space. If they have both, if they have a district court warrant and misdemeanor charges, the jail has to confirm the district court warrant first.
Not first, but in conjunction, yes.
So then, until the warrant is confirmed, they have to go into one of our 2 beds.
Yeah, if they have multiple jurisdictions, that is not, by definition in the contract, is not a city prisoner.
Right. So I just want to make clear, it's 7, but really, it's only 2 at the beginning.
No, that's not true at all.
Yeah.
No, we make concession to allow your people to book those 2 extra people in there if they have multiple charges at different jurisdictions.
Mm-hmm. So not just district court and city, any?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
So sometimes those are longer term than a weekend, like municipal court.
Right.
Usually if we arrest somebody on a Friday,
Mm-hmm.
on a DUI or whatever municipal code, they're usually out by Monday afternoon.
Right.
The anti-beds, if it's a long term, they could be up there a couple months. So those 2 beds could be tied up longer term than usually just a weekend, or if the judge says, hey, they need to go do 2 weeks in custody. Those are also part of the bed. So when the judge says, hey, you're going to be confined for 30 days on a city charge, that drops down one of those beds also.
So I guess one of my questions is hearing this, which is kind of concerning to me, then, is that, is there a report, or does the Shelton Police Department know the beds that are available every single day?
Yes,
100%.
There's a Google Doc or something that
100%.
they can see.
And I'll explain how we do it on our shift so everybody knows. When I get on shift as a supervisor, I will call dispatch, say, hey, call into the jail, find out how many beds we have. If it's been a really busy week, we may have 1 or none. We've had weekends where I've come into work where there is no beds available all weekend. So we can't really, unless it's a Class A or B felony, we can't do much. We can cite them, but that's about it.
Yeah, and I mean, I've seen pages and pages of denials that I've asked from the city manager to give us of how many times that we call, do you have a bed? No, or we can't book that person for COVID reasons. I'm sure that was legit, or not enough staff. So I'm really confused about the 7-bed thing, because I've seen all these pages that say that we've been denied, and then we actually had I don't know if you know that we actually had a high priority domestic violence warrant that wouldn't be booked. So I'm just really confused now about the 7-bed thing, so I'd like to know more about it. down the road.
Can you not work in conjunction with other cities, when they have the beds to put maybe somebody like Eric said that was really violent? Instead of just letting them go in our city, is there any way you can work in connection with the other jails that might ever let that happen?
So there's a lot that goes into that, that's more than my pay grade. But we do, if we get a warrant out of Thurston,
raise.
if we get a warrant out of like Thurston County, Kitsap, Lewis County, Grace Harbor, anywhere that we can meet and greet another officer and transport, we do that as much as we can. But then other counties are also in a lot of the same thing. The jails aren't getting the staffing because people go do other jobs, and a lot of people aren't applying for being in law enforcement and corrections as there used to be. So if they don't have the staff in their jails or on their patrol, we're kind of stuck. And as much as
It's not a glamorous job.
No, and we have reached out to Lewis County, to Thurston County, to Kitsap County, about contracting for extra beds so that we don't have this type of issue. And we've also added to, one other thing I added to, or council added to the legislative agenda for the state is asking for state money for help building new facilities and for retention bonuses and recruitment bonuses for correctional officers.
Right, we're working on bills right now to take before the concessions coming up, so we've got to prepare for that. But that's one of the topics that every county, so all 39 counties are working on, trying to get funding. We're also working at the federal level, trying to get more funding so that we can work on improving our jails or building onto the jail or building a new jail, something. So every county is working on getting the funding.
And Chief Hanson, correct me if I'm wrong, weren't most of the, well, I won't say most, many of the jails in rural counties built with state money in the 80s?
Yeah.
80s.
Ours was.
Right.
Yep.
Ours
So-
was, Lewis was.
Lewis, right, yeah.
Colum was, Grace Harbor, I think Grace Harbor in the 70s, but yeah, but they were all state funded back then. And when they built the jails, they didn't build them any bigger, they just modernized them. They got rid of the old bars and, you know, they have now sliding doors with glass windows and things like that, so.
Right.
But yeah.
But that's where the problem is for many of these counties. You know, King and Snohomish, I think, are much different. They built their own, but they're in a much different environment than we are, and many other counties in the state are.
So you said something about us denying people, you have pages and pages and pages of denials. So I can provide evidence of some of those denials, that when we tell an officer from the city that that person appears to be crazy in the back of your car, go get medical clearance, and they never show back up, and it gets coded to dispatch as a denial. So there's that happens. There's the times when they go to the hospital doesn't do anything with them when they get released. There was COVID that we dealt with the last 3 years, and if somebody has symptoms of COVID, they don't come to the jail, they have to go to the hospital and get cleared. So there's lots of different mitigating reasons that people haven't been booked into jail, and COVID was especially difficult. But the document you have has been updated as recently as 2000, last year.
Yeah, I've had that for years.
So,
I know there's a lot of social services that the police are taking on now.
yes.
So shouldn't we have more social services embedded with the police?
Yeah.
Some jurisdictions are doing that. I think Port Angeles has done that,
Burien has done.
and Burien has done that. And I think that's something that we should look at to pursue, is to find more.
Yeah.
We have like a limited navigator system, right? But
Mhm.
can we have more social workers exactly with the cops when they go out on calls, and then we go, okay, I got it, you got it, you know,
Yeah.
Officer Lawson, no, it's Amber's.
And
You
then
know, so, I mean, I think it's something that we can do to be efficient and also be in front of things,
And-
because the nature of police work has changed, right? So I think we need to get in front of this, start putting social workers out there, who might even have a better chance of getting recruited than some, I don't know. And
Depends.
social workers get,
We're throwing huge bonuses to sign on, and we can't get people.
I think it's all
Yeah.
Well, the same is true for,
Because it could be a private situation,
yeah,
and then that puts the cops in a bad situation, have to protect not only the person who is going bananas, but
I'm saying there are models that have done
Yeah,
it.
yeah, it's been very
And that we can,
successful.
and we can look at,
Social
and we can look at
workers
that.
do.
That's what I'm throwing out there.
Go
Yeah,
out with
no, and
police
I
and,
think
like,
if we had funding for
Push
that, I
county.
know everyone, just about every profession is facing a recruitment problem. And I know for a fact that police officers are facing that. I mean, when you look at the bonuses that certain places are paying out to recruit new officers, it's 30 grand in some
Or
cases.
50,
And
I've
that's still
seen
not
50.
And 50, and they still can't get the people there. So I have no doubt that the correctional officers are facing the same thing. They can't find anybody who wants to do it, which is part of the problem. We can't, we find it very difficult to find people that want to be a police officer.
Was it two weeks ago, King County had to shut their doors to incoming
Right.
people because they didn't have the staff to book people.
Yeah, and they can't do it, and if that starts happening in the state prisons, I'm sure it probably already has, but, you know, that's part of the problem. All these things are parts of the problem, you know, not unique to Shelton, but still it's something that we have to deal with. There are models out there that work, it's just a matter of resources, money.
Can you also throw in models of providing workforce housing for law enforcement and city employees?
Mm-hmm.
To have a market rate or below market rate housing for them as well, and especially with we have a lot of property in the city. Can we find somebody who can develop those properties within the city for city and county employees?
Yeah,
Especially
we have-
those in the most
Yeah,
need.
that was one of the things we've talked about. Again, it's not really that much different than the mitigation side, it's all about location.
We have to do education too, because if people hear affordable or homeless, they're gonna say no.
Right.
So we, as providers, and everybody in this room, I would encourage you to go to the city council meetings. I have been doing that myself and speaking every city council meeting for 3 minutes, just to educate, and I know Dean has been there too, God bless you, to educate people about what is happening, because I think if the community understands better what the crisis is, because if they don't see it, they're not living it like we are. And they need to hear from all of us that this is what is needed. And I think the business owners especially, Dean, you've done a really good job of that. You know, we're not trying to be heartless, we're trying to figure out solutions that work for everybody. If we keep going and educating the public about why this is happening and what the need is, my hope is that when you talk about affordable housing or you talk about housing for homeless, you will not have the backlash that you've seen. And that's the only way I know of. And I applaud the City of Shelton. You've been an exceptional partner to Quixote Communities to get these 30 units developed. But it took years.
Well, and that's what I wanted to point out, even pre-COVID, before that, when the Quixote Communities was first proposed, and it was, you know, the location for it and all of those types of things. Those public meetings, I mean, get yelled at, you know, all Wednesday to Sunday. It was ridiculous. I think my second day on the job, I was at a meeting at Christmas Village up there for a community meeting. Getting yelled at by all the people in there. But I think that no matter what you propose or where it is, somebody is going to be upset about it. So that's part of it.
We couldn't even build affordable homes.
Right.
Because people went nuts.
Right.
They were going to be, no, it's not a different subject. It's people don't like change. I mean, these were going to be below market rent. They were going to be, you know, they were affordable. They were close to services, and people went nuts about it because they thought we were going to build a slum neighborhood. I answered my city phone, and it was good. Why are you building a slum neighborhood? What are you talking about? They still have to have jobs. They still have to have credit. These weren't low-income homes, and people went nuts over it.
Well, and it's the same thing.
And now we're talking about doing less than that.
If we do a mitigation site, then we'll have to do a transitional housing site. Then we'll have to do a affordable housing, workforce housing site, and the same conversation is going to happen every single time we do this.
Well, let's use that 9 acres.
I'm gonna tell you the argument on those houses is the way it was written. Because I'm all for affordable housing, but the way it was written sucked. And people that are just laymen taxpayers, I wouldn't have voted for it the way it was written.
There was nothing to be voted for. It was somebody who built these homes.
I still say, but I'm just telling you, it was the way that it was written.
Well, that's over.
Anyway, but,
So
well, it's not though, because if you're gonna do affordable housing and that's part of the 3-step process,
that's to take into consideration.
Well,
Because you
you're
want the
looking for-
community,
How do you market it?
What are you're
but
saying?
that's what I mean, you
So
want the
tell-
community to support it.
Well, let me know what about it sucked.
I have to go back and read it, I'm good, I mean, I'm just being honest, that's me just giving you a
No, I know.
layman, I'm just a general person.
I know, but send me an email.
I
What
I
about
can
it
tell
sucked?
you that your area median income that was presented was not for Mason County, it was
Yeah,
for King
no.
County.
That's not true.
But the minute people hear homeless,
Homeless, affordable,
houses,
yes.
the first thing they think of is, I'm gonna have a drug addict and a schizophrenic next to me, and I don't want that. They don't, Sacramento, I just read last week, somewhere in Sacramento, they built 80 of these homes, but they had to qualify. If you let people know that people coming into these homes still have to qualify, that's different. If you just say we're doing homes for the homeless, the first thing they think of is that the people that are causing the problem on the street are the people coming into those homes. And then, God forbid, I don't want those by my kids. It's not that they don't understand that these people, like Eric said, have to have credit, they have to qualify, they not be on
People see
hard
the
drugs or
10%.
whatever.
One more comment, and then I lied, because I said this was gonna be over early. But one more, and then we'll talk about next steps, okay? So,
And I guess that's my question is, we could sit here and meet twice a month and talk about this. And frankly, I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in, as a group, can we support, what is the first step? Because that's the only way we're gonna get a shelter built,
Yep.
is we start the first step.
Let's
So,
build pallet shelters on C Street, there we go. So,
I mean, I mean,
Why not just a place
I
to
think
pitch
you have to have
tent?
a uniform
we can
message.
do that too. We can do both.
I mean, if
Why
you care about
build?
what it looks like,
Why
if
build?
you care about what.
So-
Are you guys willing to run?
Yes,
So, hey,
Okay. I know.
let's, I'm the one who has to coordinate all this, so let's figure this out.
Thanks,
okay?
though.
So, look at the criteria in the ordinance that the council just, is considering at the moment for the private campsites. That's what will govern what a mitigation site looks like.
Can you
I'll send that
that?
all, I will, I'll send that all out to all of you, so you can take a look at it, I'll even tell you where to find it in the ordinance. The second piece I'm gonna send out is, research that I've done, for our next meeting, research that I've done on what works. And the best model that I have ever seen, throughout the entire country is something called Housing First. And it came out of Salt Lake City, Utah. And I will send all of that to all of you, so you can read about it, and then we'll talk about it at the next meeting, what works in other places that might work here. So, the next meeting, if we're going every 2 weeks, will be August 9th. At 10 a.m. Right here. All right, meeting's over. I'm 5 minutes early, I didn't.